Let's go ahead and try to sell these players off of your fantasy football rosters before week one. We think they're going to have a less than average week one, and we're not so much predicting their performance and saying, oh, they're going to suck week one, so sell them before that happens. But it's a combination of A, we think their price is as high as it's going to be all season, and B, when they do disappoint in week one, you can get more for them now before that happens. So let's go to our first guy here. And first, make sure you drop a like and make sure you subscribe if you play fantasy football. And if you want an advantage over your league mates this season, we're here to give you an advantage over your league mates to help you win your league. Let's talk about TaiJ Spears first, because TaiJ Spears, pretty popular name after last year, right? Doesn't have an ACL. That's kind of interesting, but came in last year and was able to be somewhat productive in an offense last year that was really, really bad. And a lot of people, myself included, didn't expect them to go out and get a running back with almost the exact same skill set in Tony Pollard, but they did. And so TaiJ, he had 70 targets last year as a rookie. He was the guy when Derrick Henry was not on the field. Derrick Henry not catching passes. Everybody knows that. TaiJ Spears, he filled that role. Hooray. And TaiJ was able to be at least somewhat productive, although not super productive. Even with that third down role, he was a running back 35.5 PPR leagues. And so a lot of people, I think, are projecting a pretty big volume increase for TaiJ Spears. I do think it's fair to say that he's going to get more volume this year and more work. I totally agree with that. However, when you're looking at the preseason, Tony Pollard played 19 of the 32 possible starter snaps. He had a clear snap advantage over TaiJ Spears the entire season, the entire preseason. This tells me that this is not a 50-50 split. This is a 55-45 or a 60-40 split. It also tells me that TaiJ Spears doesn't necessarily have to be the receiving back. Tony Pollard had that exact role in Dallas 2 years ago where he was able to be actually a running back one as the running back two on his team, as not even the starter. He actually fits that role as good, if not better, than TaiJ Spears does. And so when you're talking about who's going to get the red zone carries there, who's going to get the passing, who's going to get the receiving usage, what am I trying to say? Who's going to get the targets? That's the word I'm looking for. Who's going to get the targets there? It's probably going to be Pollard, I think. And when you're looking at Tony Pollard and TaiJ Spears, especially this week, they opened the season against the Chicago Bears. Nobody knows what this game is going to look like. You have the Chicago Bears, brand new rookie quarterback. You've got them bringing in Keenan Allen. You've got DeAndre Swift now on that team. Completely new offensive personnel. On the flip side, you move on from Mike Vrabel. You move on from Derrick Henry. Those two things alone are going to lead to a drastically different looking Tennessee Titans offense. And so because of that, and because of the ambiguity behind Brian Callahan and his offensive situation there, and in his game plan for this team that includes a young quarterback we know almost nothing about, with a new running back and a new wide receiver one, we have no idea what this game is going to look like.
Zero.
But what we do know is that Tony Pollard got signed to be the running back one there. It's reflected in his deal and the team investment. It was also reflected in the preseason. TaiJ Spears still holds quite a bit of value in a lot of fantasy leagues. Yep. Shop him for whatever you can get. And again, in terms of what you can get for TaiJ, it's going to be largely dependent on your league and what platform you're playing on, especially because you just did your drafts. However, he's going around guys like Zach Moss. I'd probably prefer Zach Moss over him. Khalil Shakir. I'm going to prefer to buy Shakir this week. Even wide receivers like Dontavian Wicks, Jacoby Myers, A.D. Mitchell, I'll take a shot there. A lot of people would argue, if you want to get a backup running back or running back two, let's go get Blake Corum. Blake Corum has gotten some run with the starters in practice and is also playing along Kyron Williams, who's getting punt returns now? You hear about that?
Yes.
So it's just the reaction.
McVay's like, how much can I run him into the ground before
McVay's
I just
he's trying to ruin him. He's like, I just gotta kill him off.
Yep.
Yeah, I gotta girly him. But count on McVay for anyways.
It's hysterical.
All of those guys in that range, I think, are good targets.
Yep.
Tony Pollard is right next to him in value in a lot of these leagues. If you can get Tony Pollard, just do it.
Yes.
But I think he's a clear-cut candidate, a clear sell candidate for week one. So
yeah, I also think Trey Benson is a clear sell candidate for week one. Here's what we know about week one, outside of all the overreactions and, this guy sucks, this guy's amazing. One thing that we do know is that a replacement running back playing behind a bell cow is probably not going to do anything for quite a while. And when everyone has Trey Benson on their roster and they're so excited about Trey Benson on their roster heading into the season, they're like, I've got him. We're good. He's the number one guy. I mean, eventually, yes, he will be the number one guy. Not denying that. But when points and winning games start mattering at the beginning of the season, you're going to start realizing that Trey Benson kind of sucks on your bench. and is putting up 0 points. And you probably can't afford that once you start struggling with injuries, once you're potentially short on running backs, once you are potentially struggling to figure out who to put in your flex because all of the guys that are on your bench are doing nothing because they're backups to backups, right? And Trey Benson is one of those guys where I think once we get to week 1, people are going to realize exactly what Trey Benson is, and that is James Conner's successor. There's a caveat to this, right? If you own James Conner and then you went out of your way to go get Trey Benson, I'm not against that because you do have basically a guaranteed starting running back in a solid offense for 17 games. Because if and when James Conner does go down, you just plug in Trey Benson, no worries, you're going to be fine. But I think you don't see teams own James Conner and Trey Benson super often because they are going so close together in rounds that really, really matter, like the top 10 rounds, right? So someone generally in your league is taking a shot on Trey Benson while the other person is taking a shot on James Conner. If that's the case, if you're the owner of Trey Benson, just go and get someone that you know is going to be starting. I mean, heck, if you have to pay up and go get Zamir White, like do it. If you have to pivot to a guy who's in, potentially a committee like Pollard or TaiJ Spears, like I would rather have TaiJ Spears than Trey Benson. And I'm telling you to sell TaiJ Spears before week 1. Like to me, Trey Benson is just not a guy that I want at the beginning of the season when I know that I can get him cheaper later on when people are lower on him, realizing that James Conner's getting all of the workload there.
All right. It's probably better I do this one, because Nathan will get death threats for this, and I can present it a little bit more gracefully. But George Pickens is going to be our next sell candidate before week 1.
Oh my gosh. I'm kidding.
We've warned you all offseason that we don't think George Pickens is a very good value. And now he heads into a week 1 matchup where when you look at...
Terrible matchup.
It's not a good matchup. 3 factors. Number 1, the offense does not project to be good in Pittsburgh. The quarterback situation does not project to be good. Number 2, the matchup. Last year, Atlanta was pretty dang good against wide receivers in fantasy football. Like, up there at the top of the league.
And now they have Raheem Morris, who's a defensive head coach.
And they just got, what's his face?
Judon.
No.
And Justin Simmons.
Simmons, thank you. Matchup's bad. Number 3, the Vegas total points for this game this week is one of the lowest of the week. I mean, nobody expects this matchup to do anything of substance from an offensive standpoint, but especially not from the Pittsburgh side of things, right?
Yeah.
And when you're looking at the total points line, 40.5. That is, I think, by my estimation, the lowest total points spread of the week. And so with Pickens, if you're betting on Pickens to have a big week, with Pickens, is the wide receiver 1 there, is going to have as much volume as he needs to perform as a wide receiver 1 this year, if that's what his skill set is. For Pickens, you're essentially betting that he is going to have a 45-yard touchdown this week.
Yes.
10 points. He'll add in those extra 2 or 3 points he gets from the other receptions he gets. He'll get 6 targets, 7 targets, and boom. You're off and rolling with a 13, 14-point George Pickens week. However, in this game, what you will not see is George Pickens coming out and getting middle-of-the-field targets, quick slants, ins, right? It's not happening. It's going to be, does George Pickens score a long touchdown? How quickly do they bring Justin Fields in, and Justin Fields whips it downfield to George Pickens for a touchdown? Everybody's freaking out about both of them. Because, with George Pickens, he's really not a possession wide receiver. Who is the possession wide receiver here? They really don't have one. It's why the offense projects to be pretty bad this year. But with Pickens especially, there's a lot working against him in week 1. So if I am going to buy George Pickens, which may be possible if he does underperform in week 1, right now, I'm actually looking to move him off my roster. I'm trying to get the maximum amount of value for George Pickens as I can while he's still worth what he is coming out of fantasy drafts.
Man, that was really nice of you.
I mean, I'm trying to be reasonable. Look, if you like George Pickens and you think he's going to perform week 1,
hey, I have George Pickens on one of my fantasy teams. And I didn't want him, but I took him.
I think the main problem sometimes with fantasy football players, you have to look at things through a little bit of an unbiased lens. Just because a player is on your team and they end up on our sales video does not mean we hate them. It does not mean we think that your fantasy team is fricked, and it does not mean that you suck at fantasy football. It just means these are guys you could potentially try to play the market on. There's nothing more to it. It is not personal.
Yeah, and that really is the same sort of concept with Joe Mixon here, right? These are guys that we think that you could potentially move off of before week 1, and it doesn't mean you can't reinvest in them later. And I know Avery's a little bit more on the fence about this one than I am, because when you're looking at Joe Mixon's price all offseason, it's been kind of iffy. Like, we both have been iffy about his price. It's like, it's not super attractive. He's going 4-5 turn. He's going back-to-back consistently with Kenneth Walker. Nobody really wants those two guys. You just kind of have to take them because they're the best options available before the crazy running back drop-off. But with Mixon, it's less about him as a talent because you're looking at last year, right? And he was getting all of the usage in Cincinnati. He was getting all of the carries, getting all of the opportunity, even getting goal line carries. And I remember last year because I was a big Mixon owner. And he ended up being fine on the year. He actually ended up being running back 5, which compared to the year previous, he was running back 12. He actually had less points per game last year than he did the year before, even though he's running back 5 overall. His first 6 games of the season, 8 points, 11 points. Please score a touchdown, Mixon. Please score a touchdown. This is all I need. Yes, a touchdown, 13 points. Are you serious? It's because he was super inefficient that game. And Cincinnati can't start a season well. Week 4, 8 points, 11 points, 7 points. Is Joe Mixon one of the biggest busts of fantasy football in 2023? You come after the bye week and it's like 18, 15, 11, 18, 7, 20. And then he becomes one of the safest, most consistent running backs towards the tail end of the season. Right? And what came? All the touchdowns finally came. The ones that we were begging for before the bye week finally came. What sucked is by the time you got to the bye week, it was week 7, you were starting to freak out because you were potentially, because of Mixon, not necessarily on pace to be a playoff team. But with Joe Mixon this year, I'm specifically looking at the week 1 matchup, right? In our buys video, we had Tank Dell because we think that CJ Stroud and that receiving core is going to absolutely cook the Indianapolis Colts because we have the historical data to prove it.
Correct.
What I suspect, and again, this is not me being super like anti or pro Joe Mixon. Here's just what I suspect to happen. I think Houston's going to score at least 35 points in that game. And I think it's all going to be from their receivers because I think the Colts secondary is that bad. And I also think that the Colts defensive line is that good against the run, which they consistently showed last year. They were top 12 against the run. It doesn't mean that I think Joe Mixon doesn't have the ability to potentially get some red zone and goal line opportunities there if they are in that situation. But I suspect that people are going to kind of freak out when they see Stephon Diggs, Nico Collins, and Tank Dell all produce at a pretty high level at the same time in the fantasy community. And they're all going to be like, well, what are we going to do with Joe Mixon? Is he just going to be boom bust? Is he going to be totally touchdown dependent? That's what I suspect is going to happen. And then I think you're going to be able to get Joe Mixon at a more palatable price later on. I think you might see some freakouts with Joe Mixon week 1.
I think you're probably right. And honestly, the reason I'm on the fence about this is because I think the Colts defense is super sketchy. However, if there is a strength to the Colts defense,
it's Gus Bradley's defensive line.
It's their defensive line because you've got DeForest Buckner, you've got Grover Stewart, who is amazing against the run. Yeah. Like one of the best in the league, so underrated. Now you've got Latu there. Like the front is good, but I just know the Colts. I know they're going to suck. I know they're going to get shredded in the passing game. Shredded.
Which is exactly why.
Do you think it's possible all 3 of the receivers have 20 or more points?
Oh, yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Like I think.
I mean, we saw it against Jacksonville last year. It was Ingram, Ridley, and Kirk were all hyper-productive. Like this isn't unreasonable, guys. We watched this week in and week out last year. This is something that can absolutely happen. People are going to freak out when they see all receivers produce week 1 for Houston. Just get ready for it.
There were some comments on some of our videos that were saying we were homers, which I think is hilarious because we're as critical.
We're very, very honest.
Of the
like,
Colts.
We're very realistic.
Of anybody. I mean, we would tell you, like, just because we like the receivers does not mean we like the rest of the team.
Again, not anti-Mixon. We could be all about Mixon in a week or two, like seriously.
Yeah. So a lot of these moves are, dependent on what league you're in, what type of league you're in, who you're playing against,
and how reactive your league is,
and what your team looks like. And so we can give you more specific sells for your team when you get a team blueprint from us, which is how we do our team reviews. It's a detailed plan for your fantasy football team going into this year. It gives you all kinds of information, your positional grades, what your waiver priorities should be, who you should be buying and selling on your roster, and what your plan should be to win your fantasy football leagues. So to get one of those, flockfantasy.com/domain. Make sure you use code domain and choose the Mother Flocker tier, the annual Mother Flocker tier. You get all of the tools that we offer, our start sit tool. You're going to get our rankings. You're going to get the My Teams, our exclusive articles, and a ton of other content from other creators on the site. So if you sign up for the annual tier, you get one of these for free, completely for free, and we will sit down, review your fantasy team, give you one-on-one advice, help you out with your fantasy team. So like I said, flockfantasy.com/domain. Use code domain, choose the annual Mother Flocker tier. But let's get back into this real quick, and let's go Rico Dowdle here.
This is where it gets ugly.
This is where it does get freaking ugly because we're talking about front sevens, right? I mean, If there's one thing we know about the Cleveland defense,
The home game Cleveland defense.
the home game dog pound Cleveland defense, it's that most likely they are not letting Rico Dowdle or any of those
No.
do squat this
Sorry.
week. They're just not going to.
Be prepared to be absolutely disappointed.
Now,
it's going to be disgusting.
Honestly, like, I think that game, when you're looking at the Vegas lines for it and the total points lines, I think it's about average.
Yeah, because both of them have really good
Because both of them has
receiving
pretty
games.
good offense, but 42.5. Actually, it's 4% below average for this week, and so the reason for that is because they both have defenses, right? Or decent
Defenses.
They both have decent defenses, and I think you could end up seeing this one be kind of a crap show. And the last person I want in a crap show is a running back.
Yeah.
Like, I mean, it goes to the same thing for the Browns as well. Like Jerome Ford this week. Like, I don't really know about that one. But with Dowdle, I do think that he has some value. If you can take advantage of it and get some really solid guys that you're really comfortable flexing every week, I'll do it. If
There
not,
are some Dowdle truthers out there.
so that's where you're
Big-time
targeting.
Dowdle
Target the
truthers,
Dowdle
right?
truthers.
Yep.
I will say this one for me has an asterisk. I think he is maybe the cheapest starting running back in the league. And so I'm a little bit more hesitant to sell him. That being said, if he doesn't perform in week 1, and if he does lay an egg like we think he might, then I think you are going to be able to not only get a good amount of get a good price for him now, but you'll be able to buy him back even potentially cheaper.
Here's my thing too. What do you think the likelihood is that Zeke Elliott gets those red zone carries?
50, 60%.
There you go.
Easy.
Yeah.
I mean, I think that's what they have him there
Yeah.
for.
I mean, that's what he did last year in New England. So
I
it kind of flew under
I
the
just
radar,
don't know
so-
with any of those guys. But again,
Yeah.
he's a cheap running back one, so if you want to keep him, I don't blame you there.
Yeah.
I think he's a sell candidate for week 1.
I think there's a lot of excitement with Mike Williams and a new situation with the Jets where Aaron Rodgers is coming back fully healthy. But at the end of the day, I cannot stand the matchup with San Fran. It really kind of sucks, honestly. And even though Mike Williams is coming back fully healthy from an ACL, he is still coming back from an ACL. And week 1, I don't expect him to get that much usage. It's as simple as that. I think Mike Williams, who is already boom bust, already an exclusive outside wide receiver who's going to get a lot of those deep ball opportunities and big playability, I think you're going to see that kind of slowly eased into his workload, and you're going to see him start to get those opportunities later on in the season, maybe even just a couple weeks down the road. Week 1, I'm just not expecting that much against a team that is just not an ideal matchup at all for those guys outside of Garrett Wilson. Like, Garrett Wilson is the only guy in Breece Hall that I'm really comfortable with starting. Mike Williams, you're probably going to see a lot of people try and start Mike Williams, flex him. Don't do it. I would try to sell him for anyone that's excited about a situation.
And then let's go Devin Singletary for the last one here. And Singletary, when you look at what Saquon Barkley did on that offense, one of the best running backs in the league from a talent standpoint, he averaged 3.89 yards per carry last year on 247 carries.
And they did not get better.
So he was an elite running back on a bad offense. What do you think a bad played 17 games each of his last 3 years, has been in not necessarily a starter, but last year, and for the Texans last
running
year,
back too, 3 straight years.
For the Texans last year, I mean, at the end of the season, he was getting 75, 81, 85, 82, 75% of the snaps, and was still, you saw the floor for him is like 3 points. Because, again, when you're looking at some of those games, there are games where he has 2 targets, 1 target. The ceiling for Devin Singletary in his boom games last year in the Texans offense was like 19 to 22 points. In a better offense, how do you think this is going to translate to a much worse offense? My guess is it's not going to be pretty. And my guess is with Singletary, when you're looking at the matchup for week 1, going and playing Minnesota, this is probably going to be a crapshoot. The whole thing is going to be a crapshoot. And again, with crapshoots, I really don't want the running backs. Am I excited for Minnesota? Am I excited about starting Aaron Jones week 1? No. I probably will flex Aaron Jones anyways. I'm not excited about it. I'm not excited about starting Devin Singletary. And so with Singletary, you can still ship him off and get some good upside wide receivers, I think. And so if you can make any of those trades, if you can get anything from your league mates of substance, because again, he is a starting running back. People just don't realize the situation is that bad. Take advantage of your league mates, take advantage of your home leagues, and go sell Devin Singletary for whatever you can get for him before week 1. But it's going to wrap it up. And again, I will say this, and I'm going to put this, I'm going to reply to a timestamp when you get offended by this video. you having these guys does not mean your fantasy team sucks.
No, you can also do whatever you want. These are our recommendations.
Like, don't sell unless you get a good return on these guys. These are just suggestions,
Right.
And it's speculation. But we're here to, again, make content, give advice. That's what we're trying to do. So make sure you drop a like on this video if you enjoyed that. Make sure you subscribe if you play fantasy football. You want to get a leg up on your league mates the entire season. We're going to be doing the groundwork, the research. We're going to have the tools. We're going to have the team to do all of that for you. You can be here and you can get that information from us. So make sure you subscribe. And like I said, flockfantasy.com/domain, code domain, annual Mother Flocker tier, and it gets you a free team blueprint for your fantasy football team and all of our tools to use the entire season. We appreciate you guys. Thanks for joining us. We'll see you later.